Whenever the lockout ends, and we've talked a lot about when that could be, and we'll get into more of that today, I've talked a lot about what the Giants' needs are post-lockout. We've talked about the offense, we've talked about the starting pitching, but what about the bullpen? It's been an area that we haven't addressed too much on this show this offseason, so we'll get into that question and many others on today's mailbag edition of Locked On Giants.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily San Francisco Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Giants, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. My name is Ben Kaspick, and on this show we provide episodes 3 days a week until the lockout ends, then 5 days a week, talking about the San Francisco Giants in a way that's data-driven and rational, but also simple, passionate, and accessible to all. I'm a former contributor for the baseball statistics and analysis websites Beyond the Box Score and Rotographs. I've been podcasting about the Giants since 2015, and I'm a lifelong fan. Thank you for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms, including YouTube, so check us out there if you have not already. And coming up on today's show, we're just going to do a continuation of the mailbag that we began late last week. We're obviously still deep in the midst of this lockout. There is some news in that regard. The two sides, the owners and the Players Association, are meeting in Florida face-to-face. They met yesterday. They're meeting right now as we speak today on Tuesday. They're planning to meet pretty much every day this week. So we'll talk about that a little bit towards the end of the show, and we'll tie it in with a mailbag question, actually. But first, I want to get to some more questions. The first one today coming from Jacob, who asks, you've talked about the Giants going after a starting pitcher or even some possible position players after the lockout ends. Do you think there are any bullpen arms they could consider making a move for, or is the bullpen something they will work on if the need arises later on? So I appreciate the question, Jacob, because I've been thinking about how I've kind of neglected to even talk about the bullpen much of the offseason. Like, I don't know how many times. I know I've talked about how they were a team of extremes, and Tyler Rogers was a big example of that. Jake McGee was a big example of that. Even Jose Alvarez, an example of that. But I haven't talked about their needs in the bullpen, if there are any. And so to answer the question in the simplest way I can, I really don't think that they're going to make any significant bullpen acquisitions. And I'm going to take this as an opportunity to talk a little bit about what I think their bullpen building philosophy is. It's pretty clear to me, and I think it's a good idea, that they are not of the mindset to build out a bullpen by signing big-name free agents. I think that the data shows that those types of deals classically don't work out very well, and that it's good to maintain flexibility in the bullpen. I look no further than the example of Mark Melancon. That signing really burned the Giants, and the thing is, like, relievers can be really good 1 minute and then fall apart the next. It's an extremely volatile position, and we have seen that firsthand. I mean, Armando Benitez also comes to mind, especially when you're talking about the closer position. When you sign a guy to a big free agent deal and then you're stuck with them, right? Like, you can't pivot. It's really hard to pivot if the performance suffers. And so that's not necessarily answering your question, because you could have, I could have just named some potential free agents who are out there, and we can look at those in a minute. But I just thought, they are pretty full in the bullpen. Right now, according to Roster Resource, which I'm going to explain is not necessarily what I'll use to predict what the bullpen will be, but they've got the bullpen predicted to be Camilo Doval, Jake McGee, Tyler Rogers, Dominic Leone, Harleen Garcia, Zach Littell, Jose Alvarez, and John Brebbia. Now, I can already hear some of you saying, no, not John Brebbia. Well, he has a minor league option. So that's, as we go through this, that is a consideration, a strong consideration, because among those names I just mentioned, the only guys who can be optioned are Doval, Rogers, Littell, and Brebbia. Now, Duvall could be an option candidate if he has a miserable spring or if he gets roughed up in the early season. It's, again, good to have that flexibility with relievers to send them up and down. But I have to think that Duvall has an inside track to be on that opening day roster and perhaps be the opening day ninth inning guy like he was to finish out the year. And then Tyler Rogers, unless something crazy happens, there's no way that he would just start the season in the minors. So then the only real names here that are spots that are up for grabs would be Littell and Brebbia. And I think that there's a decent chance that both of those guys do start the season in the minors. But then consider the fact that Tyler Beede is out of minor league options. So I think they're probably going to sign another starter, like you said, that I said. And so that would push Beede into the bullpen if he's on the team at all, because they cannot just send him to the minor leagues. And I don't think they just want to lose him for nothing. And so let's say you move Beede into the bullpen. That's really only one spot that's up for grabs at that point. And now I should also mention that guys who are projected here by Roster Resource, and this is where I come in and say I don't necessarily agree with Roster Resource, and it could be different than what they're saying. But the Giants also have on their 40-man roster Sammy Long, Gregory Santos, Kervin Castro, and Sean Jelly projected to be in that AAA. They've got him in the starting rotation. But that's the beauty of what the Giants' flexible pitching staff looks like right now. All of those guys, I don't know about Jelly, but Long, Santos, and Castro all pitched out of the Giants' bullpen in 2021, and I would expect them to be candidates again to fill a similar role in 2022. Santos has a big arm, big arm. He was popped with a PED suspension, though, last season, but he's eligible to pitch again, and apparently he looked just as nasty as ever with a Camilo Duvall-like repertoire, high 90s, touching in the hundreds with his fastball, and then a wipeout breaking ball. And then Kervin Castro, he was a solid and steady piece in that bullpen for the Giants last year, and so he could take the spot of a Zach Littell or of a, I forget who was the last guy that I said was an open spot. Oh, John Brebbia. So he could easily take that spot. And then again, you've also got Beede under consideration. And then guys projected to be relievers in the minor leagues by Roster Resource, but guys who are on the 40-man roster include Hunter Harvey, Caleb Berger, and Junior Marte, who was just added to the 40-man this offseason. And then you've got RJ Dabovich kind of climbing through the ranks. And so all of that to say, I don't really see a spot for a reliever. And also, let's not forget, this Giants bullpen led the major leagues in ERA in 2021, 2.99. Next closest was the Dodgers at 3.16, and then Tampa Bay at 3.24. So the Giants were the only team in the twos, 2.99, but still, they had a terrific season, and I kind of expect them with their flexible roles, and nobody really, they called themselves the most bang for buck bullpen in the league because they don't really have any big names or any highly paid relievers, and yet they were just all very effective. And that was kind of the theme of the whole Giants roster. And so the bullpen, I think they're set up really, really nicely with that flexibility and effectiveness, kind of a deadly combination there. So coming up next, we'll wrap up that discussion and we'll get to more mailbag questions, including the latest on Mauricio Dubón, who is in a critical juncture of his career. So all of that next. But first, this is a time of year I've pretty much given up on all of my New Year's resolutions, but not this year. I'm sticking to my resolution to eat right thanks to Built Bar. It almost feels like not really a resolution because I actually enjoy eating them. Have you tried the Puffs? If you haven't, you're missing out on Built Bar's best tasting bar. Puffs are the first ever protein-infused marshmallow. Yes, you heard me right. Protein-infused marshmallow. They're fluffy. They're marshmallowy. They're not just a protein bar. They are a treat, and they're covered in 100% real chocolate. So you might be thinking, yeah, that sounds great, but I'm trying to eat healthy with this New Year's resolution that I've probably given up on long ago. But anyway, most Built Bars contain just 130 calories, just 4 grams of sugar, 4 net carbs, to go along with 17 grams of protein. Truly unbelievable. Go to BuiltBar.com, use promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off your next order. Use promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. All right. As promised, we are going to talk about the fact that this episode is brought to you by Rock Auto. With the ever-increasing numbers of makes and models, it's now impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts you need. Why endure the often pointless or seemingly intimidating questioning? Is your Odyssey an LX or an EX? And wait while the person behind the counter orders the parts on their computer, choosing the only brand their warehouse happens to carry. You have computers with access to rockauto.com at home and in your pocket. Save time and money when using Rock Auto. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the exact same parts from a chain store or car dealership? Random example, a Honda Odyssey fuel pump is $353 from a chain store and just $216 from Rock Auto. Rock Auto is a family business serving do-it-yourselfers for over 20 years. Go to rockauto.com right now and see all the parts available for your car or truck. Write Locked On in their How Did You Hear About Us box so they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. rockauto.com. All right, as promised, we are going to get to more mailbag questions. I do just want to kind of wrap up that bullpen conversation. I think it's a really interesting one, and I appreciate the opportunity. I appreciate being asked the question. Locked On MLB Prospects host Lindsey Crosby is a prospect encyclopedia, and he's going deep on the MLB stars of tomorrow. Locked On MLB Prospects is free and available wherever you get podcasts. So, getting back to the mailbag question, I did point out there that the Giants' bullpen led the major leagues in earned run average. That being said, I have to say, in fielding independent pitching, they were not first. They were actually, they were second. I was about to say, well, they were significantly worse. They're not an overpowering bullpen. They weren't necessarily near the top of the leaderboard in terms of strikeout percentage, just as an example. They were 22nd in strikeout percentage. So that's, normally you think of dominance and leading the league in ERA in terms of overpowering stuff and striking people out. But the Giants bullpen as a whole wasn't really about that. They were 11th in strikeout rate minus walk rate, but overall they were first in walk rate. So that's like all coming from the walk rate. 7.4% by their relievers led the major leagues. So they throw strikes. They keep the ball on the ground. I'm pretty sure that was a big, certainly of the Giants in general, but of the bullpen, they were 12th in terms of ground ball rate. So they're an interesting group, and a group that mostly I would say was effective by pounding the strike zone. Obviously, they've got a lot of different arm angles, a lot of different stuff. Jake McGee throwing like almost only fastballs. A team of extremes, a bullpen of extremes. So I just think, like I said, the flexibility, the option ability, guys who can get sent up and down depending on performance. The bullpen is in a really good spot, and so I don't really see the need for them to be adding to that. So anyway, hopefully I answered the question there. Next question comes from Curtis, who says, Dubón, comeback season? I've seen a few of his workout videos. Unfortunately, I have not seen those, so I can't really comment on the videos themselves, but I trust that he's looking swole and kind of ready to take on a bigger role. I know that's something I've always appreciated about him, is that he does seem to want to learn and want to get better. 2021 was a rough season for him. He started out the year with the major league team. He was kind of supposed to be the everyday center fielder, certainly against left-handed pitching, and it just didn't happen for him. He lost that role, and in the middle infield where he was supposed to kind of back up at shortstop and even second base, he lost that role. Donovan Solano and eventually Thairo Estrada overtook him, and so this is a critical season for Mauricio because he is out of minor league options, and so something is going to have to give with him and with so many other Giants players. That's kind of a major underlying story, or yeah, it's kind of a major storyline going on beneath the surface here for the 2022 Giants season, is all these players who are out of minor league options, and he is among them. And so what that means is, coming out of spring training, so many guys who have spent a lot of time in the minor leagues in 2021 and 2020, they can't just send them to the minor leagues. There's too many guys to fit on the major league staff, and so something is going to have to give. It could mean that the opportunity is ripe for a trade. And like when I look through here, we've got Steven Duggar out of options, Lamont Wade Jr. out of options, Tyro Estrada out of options, Tyler Beede, like I said, out of minor league options, and Mauricio Dubón. I'm continuing to scroll through here. Guys who are on the 40-man but out of minor league options. That seems to be the full list. There are some other guys, of course, that can't be optioned. If you have 10 or 5+ years of service, you just can't be optioned. But the guys I just mentioned have less than 5 years of service time. Darren Ruff also among them. The guys I was trying to mention were guys who have been optioned players, guys who have been up and down but no longer can be. And so if you just say, okay, well, all of those guys should be on the major league roster, it's too many guys. And so something is going to have to give. It could lead to some trades. It could lead to guys being DFA'd who you might not think should be DFA'd or would have otherwise been DFA'd. But that's going to be the way it's going to have to go. And Mauricio Dubón is among them. And so, yeah, I think he's going to continue to have an opportunity come spring training to just prove. To me, the big thing is, like, can he be disciplined at the plate? When he's just a wild free swinger, it's a problem, and that's kind of in his nature to just hack. But we've seen at times in 2020 and in 2021, he can get patient, and he's working on that. And he tries to kind of hit the ball hard in the air, which is great if you can be successful with it and be patient. And we know that the defensive upside is there. He was a good defender, very good defender at second base and in the outfield. He was one of the best defensive players in the league in 2020 overall in terms of his overall contributions. And so, yeah, Dubón comeback season, why not? He's got something to prove. I think I mentioned Estrada is also out of options. And so it's hard for me to see the Giants carrying both Dubón and Estrada at the same time, and they're both out of options. And so something really, really is going to have to give, and I will be very interested to see what that is. So the next question comes from Jesse, who asks, when will the lockout end? And there's a smiley face at the end of the question because, of course, Jesse knows that I can't know for sure, but I have given educated guesses about this. So today is February 22nd. The two sides are meeting every day this week, supposedly. They met yesterday. They're meeting right now, and we're going to talk about what went on in a minute. But I don't see anything happening this week, certainly. And, I mean, that would be a miracle, and I would be ecstatic if that happens. But the reason they're doing this is because they believe, the league believes, that an agreement must be in place by the end of the month, essentially, in order for the regular season to start on time. And so we are less than a week away from the end of the month. The 28th is on Monday. So I don't see that happening. I think missed games, I've continued to say this all off season, is what's going to finally really motivate these two sides to start to get closer to an agreement. And so I'll say, I mean, sometime in March, maybe late March, maybe early April. I know that's maybe a little bit pessimistic with the season possibly being delayed by about a month would be the end result of that. So at this point, given that they're meeting every day this week, I might be a little bit more optimistic, but a lot is going to be determined by the tone of the two sides by the end of this week when they've met every day. So coming up next, we'll talk about the latest going on in Juputer, Florida, where these two sides are meeting and allegedly trying to come to an agreement and end the lockout. So stay tuned for that conversation. But first, football might be over for this season, but basketball is full steam for both pro and college hoops. From all the latest odds, totals, player performance, props to where the next fired coach is going to land, BetOnline.net is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. BetOnline remains the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And it's not just basketball. BetOnline is your source for hockey, boxing, and UFC odds right to the Olympic coverage and information. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, here we go. We are going to wrap this up by talking about the latest with the lockout, the two sides meeting in Juputer, Florida, what went down on Monday, what's going on today. And so essentially, like I said, I've said this one other time, but I really also mean it this time. I meant it last time and I mean it this time. So much, like if you ask me that question again in a week, I believe I'll have a much better answer. At least we'll have a much better idea as to whether a deal seems possible relatively in time to miss very few, if any, games to start the year. I continue, like I said, to answer that question, to be pessimistic about the regular season starting on time. I think that we're going to miss at least a couple of weeks, and my prediction there was to miss about a month. And I think, honestly, that wouldn't be the worst outcome in the world. The worst outcome would be this thing drags on and we're missing month after month and we're still not reaching an agreement. That would be a disaster. But hopefully that can be avoided. But by the end of this week, when they're meeting every day, we'll have a much clearer picture of where things stand. Because where things stand right now is that it's been a slog. The two sides have the pace of the negotiations has been slow, and then the movement has been marginal and just small incremental steps, baby steps, and yet they're still very far apart. They're like slowly moving inch by inch closer to each other, but neither side has made any kind of significant movement off of their original positions. I would say that the players have made more movement. They've dropped the idea of players reaching arbitration after 2 years. They've moved it to the top 80% of players with between 2 and 3 years of service. The status quo is the top 22% of players between 2 and 3 years of service reach arbitration. So they've given on that. They've given on, I'm blanking on exactly what else they've given up a couple of other significant things that I'm just blanking on at the moment, because there's a lot to these negotiations. But what went down yesterday is that the league made a new proposal to players. They basically met for all day. I mean, so they met and then the two sides separated and they convened for like 3 hours together and then they met again. But the gist of it is the league upped its pre-arbitration bonus pool amount from $15 million to $20 million. The players are asking for $115 million in this bonus pool. It's a little bit confusing. You can hear my explanation about this in one of the episodes last week when we talked about the lockout. But the players originally were asking for $105 million, then $100 million, and now $115. So it might seem like their ask went up, but because of what I said with them changing the arbitration, the service time after which players reach arbitration from 2 years to the top 80% of players between 2 and 3 years, it made sense that they also increase the bonus pool amount. But anyway, they're still very far apart because the league is also proposing the status quo there of only the top 22% of players between 2 and 3 years reaching arbitration. So that is a big gap, plus the pre-arbitration bonus pool amount is a huge gap, and that's a big reason why I'm pessimistic. So the league, additionally, the other kind of significant change to this proposal was that they said for the draft lottery, which is interesting, both sides are zeroing in on this as something that will transpire. The question is just how many spots are up for grabs in the lottery. The league has proposed 3 spots, the top 3 picks being gained via a lottery, and the players wanting 8. Well, the league upped their proposal from 3 spots to 4 spots. So that's where we stand. That is the latest. And that is all the time we have for today. Thanks again for making Locked On Giants your first listen every day. We're free and available on all platforms. Once again, my name is Ben Kaspick. Check me out on Twitter at Ben Kaspick, Kaspick. I can't wait to be with you again later this week. We're going to cover the latest with the lockout. There's going to be more information coming out of today's meeting. So please come back for that, and we'll also probably do a fresh set of mailbag questions later in the week. I can't wait to be with you again then 2 more times this week. Thanks again for listening. Stay Locked On Giants.